my background is a bit eclectic, but it informs my point of view. So I actually start from the health side as providing care. And from that, I have a sense of what it's like to have someone who is sick, dying in front of you, and have to consider that in the communication. I'm a researcher. And actually, for those of you who remember America Online, AOL, Better Health, does that remind you of anything? I did some of the early research regarding Better Health, a study of about 250,000 patients over 15 different chronic disease categories, and I came up with an assumption that was proven by the data, that people with a similar condition, women with breast cancer, people with diabetes, they feel a connection to each other that transcends demographic groups. And my recommendation was to the pharmaceutical industry, in this real nascent way of connecting with people, that they should lean in and actually support patients from making those connections. That in fact, a more empowered patient would be perhaps a more adherent patient, a more collaborative patient. Of course, the pharmaceutical industry at that time said, no, Gil, you don't really seem to understand our business. Doctors are our customers, not patients. Now, we're in a very different place today, aren't we? From there, I went on to create a company. I spent some years in government. I served on the CMS Part D working group. As you heard, I had the privilege of being the CEO of the world's largest health marketing communications company for a few years. Then went to private equity, a fund that's today about $11 billion in active management. And then decided to really root myself in this sort of work. My first paper on digital health actually dates back to 1994. And my first experience with remote patient monitoring was in 1977. I bring all that to you. For all of you here today, I'm going to talk about B2C, B2B, B2B2C, all of that. And I'm going to give you some numbers. Don't focus on the little print. The data actually are from 250 million data points, looking at 14,000 ventures around the world. It's fairly voluminous. I'm going to be here all day. During the breaks, after the meeting, you want to ask questions, by all means. I don't want to get wrapped up in each individual slide. I have a tale of two cities in this presentation. On one hand, I'm going to talk about therapeutic categories. How many of you are involved in specific therapeutic categories? Raise your hand. You're looking at neurology or cardiology. A few of you, okay. How many of you are looking at systems, improving the health system in terms of working with B2B, health systems, hospital systems? Many more of you. Something in this presentation is relevant to all of you. And yesterday we began the presentation talking about, I think, one of our keynotes talked about a 31% drop in investment. And a few nods. I actually say throw that out. Not that it's incorrect, it is correct, but throw that out. I'm going to give you also during this presentation a private equity perspective of what's going on, because where the money is going or entering into the system actually influences the volume of the money. If you come in later, Series D or Series C, guess what? They want a lot more. If you see something that's interesting to you on that round A or B, you need a lot less money to have a lot more voice and control. All those things are happening right now. It is not linear. It is not linear. It is like a Rubik's Cube within a Rubik's Cube within a Rubik's Cube. So I just thought I would dissect a little bit of this data for a moment and start with something that's precious to me. I'm a former chair of the American Heart Association for the Northeast region. I just decided I would take a cut of data looking at digital health in the cardiovascular area compared to other categories. The cardiovascular area actually is the oldest area of digital health. Ventures started to really incorporate. I saw them in 1977 when we were using bracelets and dial-up to look at cardiac function. But in 2015, they really started to jump in here, and you can see the number of ventures. Now look down below in terms of less time, more ventures, mental health. 2 years from now, that's going to shift. And that's why I say, don't look at anything today as the trend. It's the moment, it's the snapshot. Nothing more than that. If you're doing something innovative, you're addressing an unmet need, it doesn't mean that if it doesn't fall here, it's not needed. It is needed. You just have to figure out how to work the system. Now, this is, I think, a very key piece of data for you to consider. Go down below to number 5 there, Health Management Solutions. You'll see it has the least amount of money going in there right now. My prediction, 3 years, the most amount of money. Our system is broken. Our health system is broken. We know it's broken. We call it fragmented. And a great example of that is my physician father-in-law, very well-known physician, in a teaching hospital, 97 years old, and was leaving this world. Teaching hospital, a great EMR system. I go to speak to the nurse about his situation. He has been taking care of his care up until that time, by the way. He's that good. He's that good. And I say to the nurse, look, could you look at the EMR? I think it clarifies that. And she says, the most important thing you need to remember, I don't have time to read the EMR. Everything we're doing, everything you're doing depends on one thing alone: human interaction, human ability. Culture crushes innovation every single time, particularly in the healthcare industry. So why am I enamored, particularly with cardiovascular disease at this particular moment in time? It is a Rubik's Cube of illnesses. Think about it. Stroke. What is stroke? It's cardiovascular function. You're throwing a clot, perhaps, or you have an aortic arrhythmia, aortic dissection, or something. Cardiovascular medicine touches diabetes, it touches neurology, it touches mental health, it touches a variety of different cascade of conditions. When you're looking at your venture, whether it's mental health or whatever, try to dissect down the broadness of the category. Try to work a model like this so that you understand that you're not just looking at mental health or migraine, all the other elements that you touch that create your value wheel. Very important to get into that sort of exercise. Next, clinical evidence. David Klein was up here, and I know David, I have great regard for him, and what he's doing is spot on. When I travel the world and speak about digital health, and he talked about this, a lot of companies see the Holy Grail as the 510K. It is not. Absolutely not. Most of these ventures will get a 510K, and you think that's permission to enter into the marketplace. It's just a permission to market your idea. It doesn't mean that the provider system or the payer system are going to really give you any attention. I would say 8 out of 10 times the payer will say rejected or denied because of insufficient evidence. And you'll say, what are you talking about? I have a 510K. And I did it studying 102 patients. Well, try to think about displacing a medication that the system is using that did a clinical trial with 5,000 patients or 20,000 patients, and then think of your 200 patients. What is the system going to trust in terms of making a clinical decision about the well-being of the patient? And so when you're thinking about planning and money, think about the science, think about publication, think about presentation, think about amplification of the number of people in your trial. Now, cardiovascular disease remains a top 5 area. It's not going to go away. And this is what I'm talking about in terms of the patient component right now. But look at the other areas that are really picking up here: oncology, mental health, and so forth. Don't pay any attention. These are huge markets. And so sometimes when people say, oh my God, I've dropped from number 1 to number 4. We're talking about billions of dollars, people. Don't sweat it. Really don't sweat it at all. Now, here's what I wanted to shift to. I've become very interested in. Our health system in this country is broken. It is broken. It's systems on top of systems on top of systems. There are much better systems, though imperfect, in the world. I have the privilege of speaking often in the United Kingdom and in Israel, particularly. And if you look at these systems that are attempting to be closed loop post-World War II systems, they operate with far greater efficiency, far greater efficiency. And it's not just that people live longer, right? And they spend probably 50% less of what we spend here. We're nearing, I think, was it $20 trillion in expenditure, GDP rather, GDP, 20% GDP. Israel, I think, is about 6% GDP. I think Germany is about 8% GDP. Don't look at the numbers specifically. Look at the system. It's not that the numbers represent the system. They make tougher choices that we're not willing to make in this country right now. And I'm not talking about end-of-life choices. I'm just talking about formulary choices, of course, all types of products. But this is where the money is going to go in the future. This is where the money is going to go. And so if you're involved in the B2B aspect of digital, health information, health technology, look at this. Look at this very closely. Now, look at this. Look at this jump between 2021 and 2022. And look at the US component of this. The rest of the world is certainly outpacing itself in terms of investment in infrastructure. And we talk about aggregated intelligence and so forth. By the way, I'm also an advisor, influencer to Microsoft on AI. I've been writing about big data and calling it nothing more than big data. A lot of data. It's what you do with it that matters. Big data is nothing more than big, lots of data. But what you do with it is the magic. How you help people synthesize the data and look for the zebras in the patient population. That's interesting. That's something actionable. Now here, I won't talk about this too much, but if we look at this in terms of the share of digital health and partnership, here's where the United States systems are getting very strong. And if you look at New York, I think that Stan or Bill talked about the importance of New York, and also David Klein. New York is ripe to lead this category. Boston is ripe to lead this category. Why? A lot of talent, money, and academic medical centers that you can take a subway to, that you can take the train to. You get the green line or the red line, whatever you want. Same with Israel for that reason. You can drive from Haifa down to Tel Aviv or actually Ramat Gan, where Sheba is, and you can do 5 meetings in one day, 3 meetings in one day. That's really mission critical, because when you have academic institutions interested in what you're doing, that to me is now the new Ivy League of our sector. And I appreciate the fact that we have many, many important representatives from industry here. And they can pave your way, but there's nothing like showing proof of action inside a system. And here are the systems. These are the leaders of this country who are now shifting their mindset. Not only do they have chief digital and innovation officers, more than that, they're setting up incubators, accelerators, and also their own funds. These are the folks that are actually putting together pots of money and bringing in talent of people who know what they're doing. By the way, I'll give anybody who wants this deck, just come over to me and I'll give you the deck. I know people are clicking away these tiny little pictures, and you'll be having to big them up. But these are the systems I would look at very, very carefully. And now look at this. This is where they're looking. The B2B model is where they're putting 77% of their investments right now. That's their focus. Help us, number one, and I look at the last presentation, which I thought was wonderful on telehealth. What we didn't hear, I'll give him the plug for this, is why is what he's doing so important? The STAR system. Are you familiar with the CMS STAR system? Patient bounces back within 30 days of exiting the hospital, of discharge. Who pays for that? Right? Does Medicare pay for that? No. The hospital pays for that. And that's why all of this investment is going on. How do I not lose money? How do I capture money? Oh, and by the way, how do I improve care? Follow the money. So This is why the 31% doesn't scare me at all. And it's not, in my opinion, adjusting back to the pre-COVID levels. That's not what frightens me at all. The reason there's less money coming in is, boom, early stage Series A ventures. As someone in private equity who wasn't in early stage ventures, what we looked for was control. We wanted control of the venture. And so whether we had to put a lot of money in, it was all driven by not voice, but control of the venture. So on one hand, yes, absolutely, we're spending less money, or they're sending less money into the category. They're spending more influential money into the category. So my advice to you, how many of you were involved in earlier stage ventures? Would you please raise your hand? About 50% of you, okay. This is really mission critical. This is your time, but buttoned up. You need to have really awesome data. You need to have a really good advisory board of outstanding clinicians who know your space. You need to do something that demonstrates that you have the rigor, the clinical rigor to get stuff done, like poster presentations at clinical meetings that address what you're doing. They're looking for this. That's what they're looking for. They want to show that you're buttoned up and you're balancing the risk. I didn't say risk benefit, if you notice. The risk of putting money as opposed to the risk of not putting money. That's what they're looking at. So what I want to say is build a portfolio of strong clinical evidence. That's your remedy here. No matter what category you're working on, whether it's therapeutic or B2B, that's what you have to focus in on your operating plan, and make sure that you're spending as much time on the engineering of your widget. Make sure you're investing in the science of proof of outcome. As David Klein said, clinical effectiveness, very, very important. Don't say, a lot of people say to me, my mother died of this, my dad stubbed his toe because he didn't have this app, right? From a private equity side, I'll put my hat on, we don't care. We smile and we don't care. And how many of you have been in a private equity or venture capital meeting and it was scheduled for an hour, but they kept you for 90 minutes? Raise your hand. Okay. The reality is they're doing due diligence on you. They're using you to learn more about your category. It doesn't mean they're interested in you. So just understand that you've got to grab their attention on the proof of concept really early on in the presentation. Now, don't look at this slide. It's tiny print. You can get the presentation, right? But what is going on in here is this is where hospital systems are kind of looking at how do they make money? How do they make money? How do they use technology to make money? And for them, it's actually all about capturing reimbursement, coding. When you go in for your presentations, by the way, if you don't have a reimbursement code attached to your idea, problem. If you need a good lawyer to figure that out, I think there's a law firm who's sponsoring this conference. Yes, go speak to them, right? Or I'll direct you to someone. First, speak to the sponsor of a HITLAB conference. That's first and foremost. They must be the best because they're associated with HITLABs. But you can also ask around and get someone who will tell you what your JCO is. Last, I just want to reinforce this data, this snippet, but this is a huge data suite I use from Galen Growth. I really want to thank them for supporting me in sort of my curiosity. Galen Growth is, I think, it's Singapore and Switzerland based. Their data is really used by the major players to make big investment decisions. I'm privileged to actually have access to the data and be able to put together the presentations. So I want to thank them. We looked at, for this presentation, 250 million data points and just sliced it down really quickly. And I just want to say that don't worry about the numbers going down or up. Worry about your venture. Those numbers have nothing to do with you. It's just the trend of the month, nothing more than that. Thank you very much.